Imagine this for a moment. You're 18 years old. You've just finished school. You're wearing your graduation gown, holding your certificate, smiling for the cameras. People clap, your parents cry tears of joy, your teachers shake your hand and say, "Congratulations! You are ready for the real world." But deep down, something feels strange. Because you walk out of that school gate and you suddenly realize the real world doesn't look like the textbooks. Nobody is asking you to recite Shakespeare. Nobody is waiting to see you solve a quadratic equation on the board. Nobody cares if you can label the parts of a cell. No. The real world is demanding something else. You need money for rent, money for food, money for clothes, money for transport, and soon, money for bigger things like healthcare, taxes, maybe even a family. And then it hits you like a brick wall. You spent 12, maybe 16 years in school, and nobody ever taught you how to deal with money. Tell me if this sounds familiar. You learned about the mitochondria being the powerhouse of the cell. You learned the exact date World War I started. You learned how to draw the diagram of an atom. But did anyone ever show you how to write a budget? Did anyone explain how credit cards work? Did anyone break down what taxes really are and how you can legally reduce them? Of course not. And here's the irony. You were tested on things you might never use again in your life. But the thing you will use every single day, money, was completely ignored. Now, some people say, well, parents should teach their kids about money. But here's the truth. Most parents don't know how money works either, because they were also products of the same system. So generation after generation, the cycle continues. People grow up financially blind, step into adulthood, make mistakes, and spend decades cleaning them up. Think about your own life. Did you ever sign a financial paper without fully understanding what it meant? A student loan? A credit card? A car finance agreement? You probably just signed, trusting that this is how life works. But what if I told you the system benefits from your ignorance? What if I told you that the reason schools don't teach you about money is not by accident, but by design? And that's exactly what we're going to uncover in this video. Because by the end, you're going to see the world and the school system in a completely different light. We'll dig into why schools remain silent about money, who profits from this silence, the dangerous traps this sets up for you, and most importantly, how you can break free and rewrite your financial destiny. Now listen closely. This isn't just another motivational talk. This is about survival, about freedom, about building the kind of life you've probably dreamed about but never thought possible. So I'll ask you something important before we dive in. Have you subscribed yet? If you haven't, pause right now. Smash that subscribe button. Because here, we don't just talk about money, we expose the truth schools never wanted you to know. We give you the roadmap to escape the paycheck-to-paycheck trap and start building real wealth. If you've already subscribed, thank you. Seriously, you're part of a movement. And if you haven't, let me ask you, do you really want to keep stumbling through life blindfolded, repeating the same mistakes your parents did? Or do you want to learn the knowledge that could change your life forever? Go ahead. Subscribe now. Join this family. And let's begin. Because what I'm about to tell you will completely change the way you look at education, money, and your future. Chapter 1. The Silence of the Classroom. Picture this, you're back in school. It's 8 a.m. The bell rings, you shuffle into class, you drop your backpack by your desk. The teacher walks in, holding a stack of chalk, maybe some markers, and begins the lesson. Mathematics. On the board, quadratic equations. You groan. Your classmates groan. Nobody is excited about this. But still, you spend 40 minutes trying to figure out why x equals something that looks like alien math. Next period, literature. Today you're analyzing a poem that feels like it was written by someone who was depressed and staring at a candle in 1820. You write notes. You underline phrases. You memorize themes that will appear on your exam. Then it's history. The teacher says, write this down. World War I began in 1914. Don't forget, because it's going to be on your test. And the whole day continues like this. Information, memorization, regurgitation. But here's the thing. In all those hours, in all those lessons, did a single teacher stop and say, class, today we're going to learn how to manage your salary. Today we'll talk about how compound interest can either make you rich or keep you poor. Today we'll teach you why debt is a trap for some people and a weapon for others. No. Silence. Complete silence. And that silence is not innocent. Because let's be real, school was supposed to prepare you for life. They told you education was the key. They said, go to school, study hard, get good grades, then you'll get a good job, and life will take care of itself. But the reality? Education gave you tools for passing exams, not tools for living life. Let's pause here and ask a very simple but uncomfortable question. Why? Why is it that a system that claims to prepare you for life leaves out the single most important factor that determines how you live your life? Money. Now, some people defend it. They say, oh, schools are about academics, not personal finance. Others say, kids are too young to learn about money. But let's test those excuses. Academics, not personal finance. Really? Then why are kids taught how to cook in home economics? Why are they taught to plant crops in agricultural science? Why are they taught physical education? Aren't those life skills? If we can teach kids to sew buttons, surely we can teach them how to budget. And the idea that kids are too young, that's even worse. Kids today are navigating TikTok, YouTube, online gaming, and in-app purchases by the age of 10. They're already dealing with money indirectly. They're exposed to advertising daily. You think they're too young to learn financial basics? Please. So again, why the silence? Here's where it gets heavy. The silence exists because a financially educated population is harder to control. Think about it. If schools actually taught you about money, here's what would happen. You wouldn't take on crushing student loans without asking questions. You wouldn't work a job for 40 years without considering alternatives. You wouldn't fall for every shiny credit card offer or, by now, pay later trap. You wouldn't believe that retirement at 65 is the only way. In other words, you'd become harder to manipulate. And guess who benefits from you staying financially illiterate? The banks. The corporations. The system itself. Because when you don't understand money, you do exactly what the system wants. You borrow. You spend. You stay in debt. You keep working, not for yourself, but for them. Let me give you a quick story. There was once a young man named Daniel. Brilliant student. Straight A's. Everyone said he was destined for success. He went to a top university, studied engineering, graduated with honors. But the moment he stepped into the real world, he realized he had no clue how to handle money. He got his first job and his first paycheck. He felt rich. So he bought a car, financed, of course. Then he got a credit card. Swipe, swipe, swipe. New clothes, gadgets, dinners. He thought he was living the dream. But within a year, he was drowning in debt. The irony? He could calculate complex formulas. He could solve equations that made people's heads spin. But he couldn't solve his own financial problems. And you know why? Because school never prepared him for it. Now, think about this for yourself. Have you ever felt like Daniel? Smart enough in school, but lost when it comes to money? If yes, Don't blame yourself. You were never taught. And that's the dangerous beauty of the silence of the classroom. It creates intelligent, obedient workers who know how to follow instructions, but not how to question the system. It's like training a bird to sing, but never letting it fly. And if you think I'm exaggerating, just look around. Why do so many people graduate with honors yet end up broke, stressed, or stuck in jobs they hate? Because knowledge of history, science, or literature without knowledge of money leaves you powerless in a world that runs on money. Now here's the twist. That silence is exactly where your power begins. Because once you recognize the silence, you can choose to break it. And in the next chapter, we're going to uncover the real reason schools were built the way they are, and why money was intentionally left out of the curriculum. Spoiler, it goes back more than 100 years, and it has nothing to do with innocent oversight. So stick with me, because once you know the history, you'll understand the strategy. Chapter 2. The Origins of the System. Let's go back in time. Not just a few years, not just decades, but over a century ago, to the late 1800s and early 1900s. This was the birth of the modern education system as we know it today. Before then, education was scattered. Local communities, religious institutions, private tutors, they taught what they thought was necessary. Some kids learned farming, some learned trades, some learned scripture, and a few wealthy kids learned advanced academics. But then came the Industrial Revolution. Factories were booming. Cities were exploding. Machines were replacing manual labor, and business tycoons were rising. Names like Rockefeller, Carnegie, and Morgan. And these men had a problem. Factories needed workers. Not just any workers, but workers who were punctual, obedient, and consistent. They didn't need dreamers or innovators. They needed people who could follow instructions, show up on time, and repeat the same task day after day without complaint. In other words, they didn't need entrepreneurs. They needed employees. So what did they do? They designed an education system to manufacture exactly that. Schools became factories themselves. Bells signaled the start and end of classes, just like factory whistles signaled the start and end of shifts. Students sat in rows, raised their hands for permission, memorized instructions, and were graded on compliance. And here's the kicker, nowhere in that model was financial independence encouraged. Why? Because independent thinkers are dangerous to a system built on control. Let's pause for a second and think about this. Imagine you are John D. Rockefeller, one of the richest men in history. You're building oil empires, controlling industries, shaping politics. Would you want the average worker to know how to build wealth? Of course not. If they knew, they wouldn't stay workers. They'd compete with you. So instead, the system was engineered to create just enough education to make you productive, but not so much that you'd question the system itself. Now let's connect the dots. Why don't schools teach you about taxes, debt, or investing? Because if they did, you'd see the traps before you walked into them. You'd understand how interest makes banks rich while keeping you poor. You'd understand how to build wealth on your own terms, outside of the corporate ladder. And if too many people understood that, the system would collapse. Let me tell you a quick story. A teacher once asked her high school class, "If you had $1 million, what would you do with it?" The kids were excited. They shouted, "I'd buy a mansion. I'd get a Lamborghini. I'd throw the biggest party ever." Not a single student said, "I'd invest it. I'd build businesses. I'd make that million grow into 10. Why? Because nobody ever taught them that option existed. Now compare that with the children of wealthy families. They grow up hearing their parents talk about investments, assets, and leverage. They learn what a stock is before they can even drive. They visit businesses, see how money flows, and watch wealth being built in real time. So while one group of kids grows up believing money is for spending, the other grows up knowing money is a tool for multiplying. Same world, different education, and the difference is intentional. Here's the uncomfortable truth: the education system is not broken. It is working exactly as it was designed. Designed to produce workers. Designed to feed industries. Designed to maintain the flow of money upward. And every time you think, why didn't school teach me this? The answer is, because it was never supposed to. Let's take a relatable example. Taxes. Think about this. Almost everyone pays taxes. You work, you earn, and a slice is taken before you even see it. Yet, schools never dedicate a single subject to teaching how taxes actually work. Why? Because if they did, you'd start asking questions like, why do employees pay the highest tax rates while investors and business owners often pay less? Why does the tax system reward debt and investments but punish earned income? Why can big corporations pay little to nothing in taxes while workers struggle? If millions of students started asking those questions early, do you think the system would stay the same? Absolutely not. But ignorance keeps the wheel turning. Now, some people will argue, but wait, schools are for learning basic skills. Money can be taught at home. Here's the flaw in that argument. Most parents were also never taught about money. So what happens? The blind lead the blind. It's not that parents don't want to teach their kids. It's that they themselves were products of the same system. They were told, study hard, get a job, save money. So they repeat that to their children, never realizing that the game has changed. And the wealthy, they play by a different rulebook entirely. That's why inequality keeps growing. It's not just about resources. It's about knowledge. And knowledge, or the lack of it, starts in the classroom. Let's imagine this. What if, instead of memorizing the capitals of countries we may never visit, we spent that time learning how to invest $100? What if, instead of dissecting a frog we'll never encounter again, we dissected the mechanics of a mortgage, a loan, or a business plan? Wouldn't that change lives? Of course it would. And that's exactly why it's not taught. Because a financially literate society is a society that demands better wages, better opportunities, better systems. And those at the top, they're not interested in better for everyone. They're interested in better for themselves. So here's the big reveal of this chapter. The reason schools don't teach you about money is not by accident. It's by design. A design crafted over a century ago, still running smoothly today, producing obedient workers instead of empowered creators. But here's where things get exciting. Once you see the design, you can step outside of it. And in the next chapter, we're going to dive into what I call the financial illusion, the myths you were taught about money that keep you locked in place, and how to start breaking free from them. Because knowledge is power. And once you see the illusion, you can never unsee it. Chapter 3. The Financial Illusion. Let me ask you a question. When you were a kid, what was the most common piece of advice you heard about money? Study hard so you can get a good job. Save your money. Don't waste it. Work hard, and you'll be successful. Sounds familiar, right? Now here's the truth bomb. Almost all of those lessons are illusions. They sound good, but they don't actually prepare you for financial freedom. Let's break them down one by one. Illusion 1. The job will save you. From the time you're a child, school paints this picture. Get good grades, graduate, find a job, and you'll live happily ever after. But let's look around. How many people actually live that fairy tale? Most people get jobs, yes. But are they free? No. They're working paycheck to paycheck. They're stressed about bills. They're trading time for money every single day. And here's the cruel part. Even if you're the hardest worker in your company, your boss will never pay you enough to become their equal. Because why would they? The system relies on you staying dependent. Think about it. If jobs made people rich, wouldn't teachers, nurses, engineers, and government workers all be wealthy? These are some of the hardest working people in society. But instead, most of them struggle financially. The job is not the safety net you were promised. It's a leash. A golden leash maybe, but still a leash. Illusion 2. Saving makes you wealthy. Now let's talk about the save, save, save mantra. School never explains inflation. It never explains how the value of money decreases over time. So you grow up thinking that if you put your money in a bank account and let it sit, you'll become rich someday. But let's do a quick example. Imagine you saved $10,000 in the year 2000. Back then, that could buy you a decent car. Fast forward to today, that same $10,000 can barely buy you a used car. The money didn't change, but the value did. So while you were saving, inflation was silently eating your wealth. The wealthy don't save to get rich. They invest. They make their money grow faster than inflation can eat it. But did school ever show you how to invest? Of course not. They just told you to save. And who benefits from that? The banks. Because when you save, they use your money to make themselves richer. Illusion 3. Debt is always bad. Raise your hand if you were taught that debt is evil. Credit cards are evil. Loans are evil. Avoid debt at all costs. That's the common belief. But here's the twist. Not all debt is bad. There's bad debt, like borrowing for things that lose value, flashy cars, luxury clothes, unnecessary gadgets. That keeps you poor. But there's also good debt, like borrowing to buy assets, rental properties, businesses, investments that generate income. That kind of debt makes the rich richer. The difference is education. The poor fear debt. The rich use it as a tool. But school, it throws them all into one bucket. Debt equals bad. Why? Because if you understood leverage, you'd no longer be trapped by the same rules as everyone else. Illusion 4. Retirement will take care of you. How many of us grew up hearing this? Work until 65, then enjoy retirement. That's the dream, right? But look around. How many retirees are living the dream? Most are scraping by on pensions, relying on family, or even working part-time jobs well into old age. Because pensions shrink. Social security runs out. And health costs skyrocket as you age. Here's the uncomfortable reality. Waiting until 65 to enjoy life is one of the greatest illusions ever sold. By the time most people retire, their best years are behind them. And the sad part? Nobody tells you that until it's too late. Illusion 5. Education equals financial success. Now, this one hits hard. Because schools sell the dream that education is everything. But if education alone guaranteed wealth, every professor would be a millionaire. Every PhD would be financially free. Every straight A student would be rich. But that's not the case. Because the kind of education that schools give you is academic, not financial. It teaches you how to pass exams, not how to pass the tests of real life. The truth is, education is important, but the right kind of education. And money education is a whole different category that schools ignore completely. The cycle of the illusion. Here's the sad but powerful truth. These illusions keep generations trapped. Parents pass them down to children. Teachers reinforce them. Society celebrates them. And the cycle continues. Get a job, save, avoid debt, retire at 65. Sound familiar? That's the script. But who wrote the script? Not you. Not your parents. Not even your teachers. The script was written by the system that benefits when you follow it. And as long as you play by their script, you'll never escape the trap. Breaking the illusion. Now here's the good news. Once you see the illusion, you can choose to break it. Instead of relying on a job alone, you can build multiple streams of income. Instead of just saving, you can invest. Instead of fearing debt, you can use it wisely. Instead of waiting until retirement, you can design a life you don't need to escape from. Instead of chasing academic success only, you can pursue financial education. But breaking the illusion requires courage, because it means rejecting the script that almost everyone around you is following. And that's scary, but it's also powerful, because when you step outside the illusion, you stop being controlled by it. And that's where real freedom begins. So here's a thought-provoking question for you, the viewer. Which of these illusions do you recognize in your own life? The job illusion? The saving illusion? The retirement illusion? Drop your answer in the comments, because I guarantee you're not alone. And by sharing, you might help someone else realize they've been living in the illusion too. And as you think about that, get ready, because in the next chapter, we're going to explore the real cost of financial ignorance. Not just in terms of money, but in stress, relationships, and even your health. Trust me, this is where the conversation gets personal. Chapter 4. The real cost of financial ignorance. Let's get real for a second. When people hear financial education, they often think it's just about money. Numbers, dollars, naira, euros. Just math, right? But here's the truth. Financial ignorance doesn't just empty your bank account. It drains your energy. It steals your peace of mind. It damages relationships. And in the worst cases, it destroys lives. The hidden stress tax. Do you know what the #1 cause of stress in the world is? It's not politics. It's not traffic. It's not even family drama. It's money. Surveys consistently show that financial stress is the leading source of anxiety for adults. Think about it. How many nights have people laid awake wondering how they'll pay rent, cover bills, or handle an emergency expense? How many arguments start not because two people don't love each other, but because the money is short? Money fights are one of the top causes of divorce. Not infidelity. Not incompatibility. Money. That's the hidden tax of financial ignorance, stress. And stress isn't harmless. It messes with your sleep. It affects your health. It weakens your immune system. It shortens your life. So when schools skip financial education, they're not just leaving you unprepared to build wealth, they're setting you up for years of silent suffering. The trap of debt. Now let's talk about debt. Picture this. A young graduate, full of hope, lands their first job. They earn their first paycheck. They're excited. They feel like they've made it. But almost immediately, debt comes knocking. Student loans, credit card bills, maybe a car loan, eventually, a mortgage. One by one, the chains wrap tighter. And before they know it, they're working not for themselves, but for the bank. You know what's crazy? Most people don't even realize how trapped they are. They think debt is normal. They think it's part of life. But here's the truth. Debt is not just numbers on paper. It's years of your life sold in advance. Every dollar you owe is time you must work to pay it back. Every swipe of that card is future hours of your life already spent. And because schools never teach you how to use debt wisely, most people only experience the crushing side of it. The dreams that die quietly. Now let's go deeper. Think about how many dreams have died because of money. The kid who wanted to be an artist, but couldn't afford supplies. The young woman who wanted to travel, but couldn't save enough. The father who wanted to start a business, but was too scared of losing the paycheck. Financial ignorance doesn't just cost money. It costs dreams. Because when you don't understand how money works, fear takes over. Fear of risk. Fear of loss. Fear of stepping outside the script. And little by little, dreams get smaller. Hopes get shelved. People settle for less, not because they lack talent, but because they lack financial confidence. The ripple effect on families. Here's something powerful to think about. Financial ignorance doesn't stop with you. It ripples into your family. When parents don't know about money, children inherit not just their genes, but their money habits. If a parent is constantly stressed about bills, the child grows up associating money with fear. If a parent believes money is evil or scarce, the child grows up carrying the same beliefs. And so, the cycle continues. Poverty is not just about lack of resources. It's about lack of financial knowledge passed down through generations. And breaking that cycle requires someone, maybe you, watching this video, to finally step up and say, "It stops with me." The health connection. Now, let's connect money to something people rarely think about: health. Studies show that financial stress increases the risk of heart disease, high blood pressure, depression, and even premature death. Why? Because when you're constantly worried about money, your body stays in fight or flight mode. Stress hormones flood your system. And over time, your body pays the price. So when schools ignore financial education, they're not just failing you economically. They're failing you biologically. They're setting you up for a shorter, harder life. The real price tag. So let's summarize. What does financial ignorance really cost? It costs your peace of mind. It costs your health. It costs your relationships. It costs your dreams. It costs your children's future. And all of this, just because nobody ever sat you down in school and said, "Here's how money actually works." That's the tragedy. And that's why this conversation matters. Because once you realize the price you're paying for financial ignorance, you'll understand why financial education is not optional. It's survival. The shift. Now here's the turning point. If ignorance is this expensive, imagine how powerful knowledge could be. Imagine learning how to make money work for you instead of against you. Imagine passing on confidence instead of fear to your children. Imagine waking up without money stress. That's what financial education can do. And in the next chapter, we'll talk about the secrets the wealthy already know. The very lessons you were never taught in school, but desperately need to hear. So stick around, because now we're about to open the vault. Chapter 5. The myths about money that keep you poor. Here's something crazy. Most of what you believe about money didn't come from experience, it came from myths. Stories handed down by parents, teachers, culture, and society. And because we heard them so young and so often, we believed them as truth. But the reality? These myths are like invisible chains. They keep you stuck in cycles of struggle, while the wealthy quietly play by a different set of rules. Let's break some of the biggest ones. Myth 1. Go to school, get good grades, get a good job, and you'll be fine. Raise your hand if you heard this one. It's the ultimate life script sold to millions of kids. But let's be honest. How many people do you know who actually followed this recipe and ended up financially free? Very few. Here's why. Jobs don't guarantee security anymore. Your grandparents could work one job for 40 years and retire with a pension. Today, that same path leads to layoffs, burnout, and maybe a retirement plan that isn't even enough to cover basic expenses. And yet, schools never updated the script. They kept pushing the same outdated formula, knowing full well the economy has changed. The truth is, grades might get you a job, but financial literacy is what builds wealth. Myth 2. Money is the root of all evil. This one is especially powerful, because it makes you feel guilty for even wanting more. Maybe you grew up hearing religious or cultural teachings that painted money as something dirty. But here's the problem. If you believe money is evil, you'll subconsciously sabotage yourself from ever keeping it. You'll spend it recklessly, avoid opportunities, or settle for less, just so you don't feel bad. But let's clear this up. The original phrase wasn't "money is the root of all evil." It was "the love of money is the root of all evil." Huge difference. Money is just a tool. If a hammer can build a house or break a window, does that make the hammer evil? Of course not. It depends on how it's used. Same with money. In the right hands, money builds schools, funds charities, saves lives. In the wrong hands, sure, it causes damage. But the tool itself, neutral. So the next time you feel guilty about wanting more, remind yourself, wanting more money doesn't make you greedy. It makes you someone who wants options. Myth 3, if you work hard, you'll be rich. Oh man, this one might sting. Because if hard work alone made people rich, the hardest working people on the planet, construction workers, janitors, farmers, nurses, would be billionaires. But they're not. Don't get me wrong, hard work matters. But it's not the main ingredient. The main ingredient is working smart and aligning your work with systems that multiply your efforts. The wealthy don't just work harder, they set up assets that work for them even when they're asleep. So the truth is, hard work without financial literacy just makes you tired. Hard work with financial literacy makes you free. Myth 4, investing is too risky, better to save. How many times have you heard this one from well-meaning parents? Don't invest in the stock market, it's gambling. Just save your money. Here's the problem: inflation. If you save $1,000 under your mattress, in 10 years, it won't even buy the same groceries it buys today. Inflation quietly eats your money. Wealthy people know this. That's why they don't just save, they invest. Because the real risk isn't investing. The real risk is doing nothing and watching your money shrink. And schools, they never taught you that inflation even exists, let alone how to beat it. Myth 5, talking about money is rude. This one keeps entire families broke. Because when you treat money like a taboo, you don't ask questions, you don't learn from others, and you repeat the same mistakes silently. Wealthy families talk about money openly. They teach their kids about assets, liabilities, and investments at the dinner table. Meanwhile, the rest of us grow up financially blind, told to just figure it out when you're older. The result: a generation that can quote history dates but can't read a bank statement. Now, let me ask you this, and be brutally honest with yourself. Which of these myths do you think you've believed the most in your life? And how has it affected your money decisions? Drop it in the comments, because trust me, once you identify the myth, you can break free from it. But here's the exciting part. In the next chapter, we're going to explore how to actually unlearn these myths and reprogram yourself for financial freedom. It's not enough to just know the truth, you have to rewire your thinking. And that's where we're heading next. Chapter 6. How to reprogram your money mindset. Here's the truth, everything you believe about money didn't start with you. It was programmed into you from the moment you were a child. Think about it. Did you ever hear things like, "We can't afford that. Money doesn't grow on trees. Rich people are greedy"? Those little phrases? They were like seeds planted in your subconscious. And over time, they grew into beliefs that now control your relationship with money as an adult. The crazy part is, most of those beliefs aren't even true. But because you heard them so often, from parents, teachers, even movies, you accepted them as reality. So if you want to become financially free, the first step isn't just learning new skills. It's rewiring your mindset. Step 1. Identify the old programming. The first step to reprogramming is awareness. You can't change what you don't see. Ask yourself, what money phrases do I remember from my childhood? What emotions do I feel when I think about money today? Stress, fear, shame, or excitement? Do I believe money is scarce, or do I believe it's abundant? For example, If your parents always argued about money, you might associate money with conflict. So even as an adult, you avoid talking about it, which keeps you stuck. Awareness is like turning on the lights in a dark room. Suddenly, you can see what's been tripping you up. Step 2. Replace scarcity with abundance. Most schools and homes teach us a scarcity mindset, the belief that there's never enough. Not enough jobs, not enough money, not enough opportunities. But the wealthy live with an abundance mindset. They believe there's always more money to be made, more opportunities to grab, more value to create. And that belief shapes their actions. Here's a simple exercise. Next time you catch yourself saying, "I can't afford this," reframe it to, "How can I afford this?" That tiny shift turns a dead end into a problem-solving challenge. Scarcity shuts doors. Abundance opens them. Step 3. Redefine your relationship with wealth. Let's do a thought experiment. Close your eyes for a second and imagine yourself with $10 million. What's the first emotion that comes up? Excitement, fear, guilt? If it's fear or guilt, that's your old programming talking. Somewhere deep down, you were taught that having too much money makes you a bad person, or that it'll make people hate you. But the truth? Money doesn't change who you are, it amplifies who you are. If you're kind, generous, and caring now, money just gives you the resources to be more of that. So instead of thinking, "I don't deserve wealth," start telling yourself, "I deserve wealth because I will use it for good." Step 4. Surround yourself with new beliefs. Here's a life hack schools never taught you. Your environment programs your mind more than anything else. If you spend all your time around people who complain about bills, gossip about celebrities, and believe life is unfair, guess what? You'll adopt the same beliefs. But if you start listening to podcasts from entrepreneurs, reading books about money, joining communities where people talk about building wealth, your mindset will start to shift automatically. It's like hanging around people who work out. Eventually, you'll want to exercise too, because it feels normal in that environment. Step 5. Take small actions that prove your new beliefs. Mindset isn't just about thinking differently. You have to back it up with action. For example, if you believe you can save money, start by saving just $10 a week. If you believe you can invest, start with a small amount, even if it's $50. If you believe you can create income, try selling something small online. Each small action sends a message to your brain. See? I can do this. Over time, those small wins rewire your self-image. Now, let me ask you, what is one old belief about money you know you need to reprogram? Drop it in the comments, because sometimes just saying it out loud is the first step to breaking it. Because here's the truth. Mindset isn't everything, but it's the foundation. You can learn all the financial tricks in the world, but if your mindset is poisoned with scarcity and fear, you'll sabotage yourself again and again. So in the next chapter, we're going to build on this foundation by talking about the real-world financial skills you need that schools never taught you, and how to start mastering them today. Chapter 7. Building real-world financial skills. So now that we've cracked open the myths and rewired our mindset, let's talk about the actual skills. Because mindset without skills is like having the keys to a car but never learning how to drive. You'll still be stuck. The truth is, schools left us unprepared. They trained us to pass exams, not to pass life's financial tests. So let's dive into the skills that should have been on every school curriculum. Skill 1. Budgeting, the map of your money. Let's start with the most basic, but also the most ignored. Think about it. How many of you were taught to actually budget in school? Not just in theory, but in practice? Probably none. And yet, budgeting is like having a map for your money. Without it, you're just wandering. With it, you know exactly where your money is going, and you can tell it where to go instead of wondering where it went. Here's the simple truth. If you can't manage $1,000, you won't magically manage $10,000. Money doesn't change your habits. It amplifies them. A budget is basically telling every dollar a job to do. And once you master this, suddenly you're not bad with money anymore. You're in control. Skill number 2, credit and debt management. Now let's talk about the trap most people walk into headfirst. Credit. Schools should have taught us the difference between good debt and bad debt. Because here's the thing, not all debt is evil. Bad debt is borrowing money to buy things that lose value, like cars, clothes, or gadgets. Good debt is borrowing money to buy things that make you more money, like property, business loans, or education that pays for itself. But most of us only ever learned about credit cards the hard way. You get approved for one, you swipe like crazy, and before you know it, you're buried under 20% interest. Imagine if schools had simulated this with fake credit assignments, showing us how quickly interest piles up. We'd all think twice before swiping. Instead, they left us to figure it out when the bills started piling. Skill number 3, taxes, the silent wealth killer. Here's something that blows my mind. We were never taught how taxes actually work. Think about it. We spent years learning how to calculate angles of triangles, but not how to calculate how much of our paycheck disappears before it even hits our bank account. Most people don't realize this. Taxes are likely your biggest lifetime expense. More than housing, more than food, more than healthcare. Wealthy people understand this. They study tax codes, hire advisors, use legal loopholes to minimize their tax burden. Meanwhile, most people just shrug, pay whatever the government asks, and complain. Imagine if schools had taught us tax basics. What income tax is, how deductions and credits work, the difference between earned income, passive income, and capital gains. If we'd learned this early, we could have saved thousands, even tens of thousands, by now. Skill number 4, saving and emergency funds. Here's a reality check. Life happens. Jobs get lost, cars break down, medical bills pop up. And yet most people have less than $500 saved for emergencies. Why? Because nobody ever told them how important it is. We should have been taught. Always save at least 3 to 6 months of expenses as a cushion. Pay yourself first, meaning save before you spend. Automate savings so it happens without thinking. It sounds simple, but it's powerful. Having an emergency fund doesn't just protect your wallet, it protects your peace of mind. Skill 5, investing, the path to freedom. This is the big one. If schools had taught us to invest early, most of us would already be on the path to financial freedom. But instead, they left us scared and clueless. Here's what should have been explained to every teenager in simple terms. The stock market is not gambling, it's ownership. When you buy stocks, you're buying a piece of a company. Real estate isn't just about buying a dream home. It can be a tool to generate passive income. Compound interest is your best friend. The earlier you start, the less you have to invest later. Instead, most people only discover investing in their 30s or 40s, when the most powerful years of compounding are already gone. Skill 6, negotiation and money communication. Here's a fun one. Did you know most people leave money on the table simply because they don't ask? Negotiating salaries, contracts, or even discounts is one of the most valuable money skills, yet schools never even hinted at it. Imagine if high schools ran mock job interviews where students practiced negotiating salaries. People would walk into the real world knowing their worth. Instead, many settle for less because they're too afraid to speak up. Skill 7, entrepreneurship basics. Finally, let's talk about entrepreneurship. Schools are designed to produce employees, not employers. That's why they never talk about starting businesses, taking risks, or solving problems creatively. But the reality is, even if you never want to own a business, entrepreneurial thinking makes you 10 times more valuable in any career. It teaches you to spot opportunities, solve problems, and create value. This skill alone could have empowered millions of young people to step out of the rat race. Now let me ask you, which of these skills do you wish you had learned first? Budgeting, debt management, taxes, investing, or entrepreneurship? Drop your answer in the comments. because I guarantee others will relate. And here's the exciting part. In the next chapter, we're going to tie everything together. It's going to be the longest, most powerful, and most motivational part of this video, where we talk about breaking free from the system, building your own path, and creating a financial legacy that outlives you. Trust me, you don't want to miss this. Chapter 8. Breaking Free and Creating Your Own Path. So far, we've exposed the truth about why schools never taught us money, we've unraveled the mindset traps, and we've walked through the practical skills they skipped. But here's the thing, knowledge by itself isn't enough. You can binge-watch financial videos, read books, even memorize quotes from Warren Buffett, but unless you act, nothing changes. This final chapter is about breaking free from the system that was never designed to make you wealthy, and creating your own path. The illusion of the system. Let's get brutally honest. The system wants you to be a good worker, not a free thinker. That's why schools trained us to memorize, obey, and stay in line. Think about it. We were told to get good grades so we could get a good job. Get a good job so we could get a stable paycheck. Use that paycheck to pay bills, buy stuff, and maybe retire at 65 if we're lucky. That's not freedom. That's a treadmill. A system where you trade your time for money until you're too old to enjoy it. And most people stay trapped, not because they're lazy, but because they never realized the cage existed. The first step to breaking free is seeing the cage. And now you've seen it. The power of choice. Here's the good news. You don't need permission from anyone to change your financial future. You don't need your boss to give you a raise. You don't need a government program to rescue you. You don't need the school system to suddenly wake up and add Money 101 to the curriculum. You already have the most powerful tool in the world. Choice. Every day, you get to choose. Will you spend or will you invest? Will you settle for comfort or will you build wealth? Will you let money control you or will you control money? The rich aren't smarter. They're not luckier. They just made different choices, consistently, over time. Building your own curriculum. Since schools won't teach you, it's up to you to build your own financial education. Here's how. 1. Read books that change your mindset. Start with classics like Rich Dad Poor Dad or The Richest Man in Babylon. 2. Listen to mentors who've been there. Not just teachers, but entrepreneurs, investors, people who've built wealth from scratch. 3. Practice in small steps. Budget $100, invest $50, negotiate your salary once. Small wins compound into big results. 4. Surround yourself with wealth-minded people. If your circle only talks about gossip and spending, you'll stay broke. If your circle talks about opportunities and investments, you'll grow. This is the education that truly matters. The legacy mindset. Here's the most important shift of all. Stop thinking only about yourself and start thinking about legacy. Ask yourself, what financial future am I building for my children? My grandchildren? Because the truth is, money is not just about survival. It's about impact. It's about making sure your kids don't start where you started, but far ahead. Wealth isn't just about mansions and cars. It's about freedom, security, and the power to give. Imagine being able to retire your parents, fund your child's dreams without debt, support causes you care about without stressing about bills. That's legacy. And it starts with the choices you make today. Your call to action. So here's the big question. Will you keep living the story schools wrote for you, or will you write your own? Because now, you know the truth. You can't unsee it. The choice is yours. Keep running on the treadmill until life runs out. Or step off, build your own financial path, and walk into freedom. And here's the secret. You don't have to do it alone. This channel is here to give you the education schools never did. So if you're ready to build wealth, create legacy, and finally break free from the system, do 3 things right now. 1. Hit that like button to let the algorithm know you're serious about your financial freedom. 2. Subscribe so you never miss a single lesson. 3. Comment below with one financial skill you wish you'd been taught in school. Let's build this journey together, because financial freedom is not just a dream. It's a choice. And today, you've just made the first one. This was why schools never teach you about money. Now go out there and create the wealth they never prepared you for. Because your financial freedom begins now.